Well, hello there. My name's Roy Todd. I'm the pastor here at the Junction Church. And one of the things that we've been trying to do over the last number of years is facilitate conversations that really help us understand each other. And the issue of racism, of course, is an issue that has very much been something that we've been dealing with as a church. We're not afraid to talk about it. And when you've got a diverse church, I guess, like we have with something, I don't know, like 50 nations in it, probably more than that, it's an important conversation because for us, we want people, when they come into the life of our church, we want them to feel welcomed and loved and respected and valued. That means a lot to us. And so that's what part of this conversation really is all about. And so tonight we're going to continue the conversation, and hopefully it's going to be of help to you as well. I would ask you just to, think about what's going to be said tonight, have an open heart. We're going to hear some experiences, and we're all going to chip in. We've got some wonderful people. We'll introduce them. I won't introduce them all now because that'll steal my thunder. So we'll introduce them all as we go along. But we're going to just chat to individuals and just hear a little something of their experiences, so that we can understand, things from their perspective, and it'll give all of us an understanding as well as to the issues that they've grappled with and faced in their lives as well. The first person I'm going to talk to is SJ. SJ is an amazing guy. He is the leader of our student ministry here in the life of our church, and just a brilliant guy, highly respected in the life of the church. So first of all, SJ, give us a little bit about your background. Then you were obviously born in London.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But your family heritage is
Korean.
Is Korean.
Yeah.
Tell us just a little bit about what it was like growing up in London then.
So I grew up in a place called New Malden, and it's basically it's known as like the K-town of the UK. So there's a lot of Korean immigrants that basically vacate to that area.
They settled in that area.
They settled in that area, and my parents were one of the families that also sort of settled in that area as well. So going to school, it wasn't too bad because we knew a lot of Korean families as well who went to the same primary school as us and stuff like that. But it wasn't as if we were the majority at all. We were still a minority in that area, but there were comfortably quite a few Koreans as well. But then growing up, I went to a secondary school outside of my hometown called New Malden, called Sutton, and now that's where it was quite diverse again, but there's less Koreans, I'd say.
Yes.
And more people from other ethnic races, basically.
Yes.
So yeah, that was my basically background growing up.
And in terms of your experience then, it's a silly question to ask. Did you experience racism? Of course, the answer to that is yes. But tell us about that experience, because obviously you are well known in our church and well respected. And I think sometimes the danger, I guess, is that familiarity breeds contempt. We can just assume, well, SJ's got it all together, and he's a great guy. He leads our student ministry. He's doing really well in his university course. But actually, you've grappled with a lot. And we've talked about this privately. Thank you for agreeing to share this. Now, tell us about some of the experiences that you had, and just tell us from whatever perspective.
I've had loads of different types of racism against me. One that I've always had to sort of grow up with was basically, obviously, I'm a second generation immigrant, right? So my parents came to this country before I was born, and I was born in this country. So technically, obviously, this is like where I'm from, where I've grown up my whole life. But I've always got it as if I've always been treated as a foreigner to other people, because obviously I don't look English basically to other people. I don't look British to people, and so you get loads of microaggressions, racial microaggressions, where people ask you where are you from, but then they start asking you like, where are you really from. Like if I said to their response from their question, where are you from, I say I'm from London. They'd come up with another question asking where you really from, to sort of subtly imply that I'm actually not British, even though I've grown up in London my whole life. So that's one of the sort of types of racism I've had. If I'm Korean, so I can speak Korean as well to my parents, and whenever I'm in public, I've sort of grown up with this now. But initially, I used to just call my mum in Korean and like in public. Talk Korean in public, but I've had instances where people have sort of like told me, why are you speaking a different country when you're in England, basically, why are you not speaking English? And that from then on I've sort of been wary of basically making like speaking Korean in public, just because that experience has really negatively affected me. So again, stuff like that, people going up to you saying why are you not talking English, and then people also, even though when I'm speaking English to them, pretending that like they can't understand what I'm saying, even though I'm speaking clear English to them. So yeah, they're a couple of the experiences I've had to face growing up in the UK.
Wow.
I've also had stuff like proper racial slurs against me. A lot of people, whatever context it was in. I remember there was a football match I was playing in, and the player of the opposition team goes up to me and just calls me a chink. Stuff like that. I've lots of people doing the eye gestures, squinting their eyes at me. Just loads of different sort of stuff that is, I guess, a lot of Asian people can sort of resonate with, specifically Southeast Asian people. And then because of the COVID pandemic as well, obviously, even though I'm not Chinese, people sort of just assume I am as well. I'm part of that sort of group. And so I've had people basically come up to me and say, COVID was all because of you, basically. Go back to your home country. Why'd you eat bats? Why'd you eat rats? Sort of all these ridiculous nonsense sort of stuff as well. So, yeah.
And we've talked about this, you and I, before, and you talked about how that when people would make those racist comments, you developed coping mechanisms to deal with that. So you would laugh, and that would be your protection. But inside, it was killing you.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So a lot of those experiences that I've just said, I faced them in secondary school. It was a lot, and obviously in secondary school you're in lessons with these sort of so-called mates and friends and peers, and so it's not as if you can just separate around, like get away from them. You're basically always surrounded by them, and so when they'd make these sort of jokes, the coping mechanism I had to sort of go with, just laugh it off basically, and just sort of joke around it, pretend I found it funny, even though like inside it was really like it was breaking me, and so I sort of just had to grow up with that sort of mentality of saying, it doesn't affect me. It does, like, just sort of brush it off basically. And I've also had to, because I've grown up in a Korean sort of background culture. It's not within basically Korean culture to show your emotions or share your feelings. So I've never felt comfortable or really being able to speak to my parents and my family about these sort of situations as well. So
even having this conversation now is a big deal. For you,
definitely.
Because, you wouldn't naturally feel comfortable to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you for having the courage to have the conversation as well. We appreciate you being willing to do that.
Yeah.
The sort of the insinuation that you're not from here, that sort of comment, what did that do to you then? What if impact did that kind of comment have on your?
Yeah, you just don't feel like you belong anywhere. So it was really hard to hear that basically, and it was not just as if it was once or twice. It was a constant. People telling me to go back to your home country again, even though I was literally born here and grew up here. It just made you sort of feel like a big piece of rubbish, really, just something left to the side. It was never really, I felt, it was difficult to sort of hear that and try and grow up with that and just get on with it, really. But I know loads of friends. Again, I've got a couple of Korean friends who also resonate with that, and they understand what it's like. So it was helpful to have them by my side and sort of be able to share experiences with each other. But it was very difficult to.
And this is an important conversation, isn't it? Because it's a conversation that's not always had. And again, thank you for agreeing to share with us tonight. Anybody got a question for SJ then?
Yeah, I was going to say I can definitely relate with what you were saying. When people go, "Oh, but where are you really from?"
Yeah.
And it's that assumption I think people have that British people can only be white or look a certain way.
Yeah.
And if anybody doesn't fit into that, you're not British, you're a foreigner. And I mean, I'm the same as you. I was born here, but I've had that before as well, where people are going, but where are you really from?
Yeah.
And they're really digging and prying like you don't belong here. And that's what it makes you feel like.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say, like you were saying there, SJ, having been brought up and grown up here and also gone to school here, work here as well, you're contributing to society, you're getting involved, especially we've been very grateful through church, to do some amazing things in our community. So we're helping out the community, helping out those around us, but people still make you feel like, oh, but you're not part of this country, or you're not part of this society, even though you do kind of so much for that.
When people make those comments, where do you think that comes from? Is that out of spite, or is it just sheer ignorance?
I mean, I try to be gracious, so I try to understand that some people may not be doing it maliciously, which is true. There are people out there that are doing it maliciously and have this view that if you're not white, you don't belong here. That is true, and that does exist. But I've been able to help people as well, and take them on the journey saying, oh, actually, I am from here. If you meant where are my parents from or what's my family heritage, I'm Sri Lankan. But if you're asking where I'm from, I'm British. So then people understand that you're asking about my heritage. So, because not everybody, I don't think, does it in a malicious way. I don't know if anybody else would agree with that, but there are obviously people who do. But then there are people who just need a bit of learning and teaching. And I think a better way, if you want to ask somebody and you're wondering what to do, is just asking, oh, what's your family heritage?
As
well.
Sorry, either that or asking where like your ethnicity basically is from. I totally agree with what you're saying though, in terms of some people are just, they need that education in terms of what the difference is of asking where you're from and what your heritage and what your ethnicity is basically. But from my experiences, most of the people who are actually targeting, basically saying those sort of comments were doing it out of spite. Really, it was really out of spite. And it was so just for those people, I feel like in life you're always going to come across those sort of people. But I guess in that situation, if you're hearing that from, and you're basically you're hearing that basically, and you're basically with a friend who is sort of experiencing that, I guess to sort of support them.
And challenge it.
Challenge it.
You support,
that's good. You challenge it, and you go up against it really, because it's not right.
Yeah, so I completely resonate with that as well. But the crazy thing is that it's actually past heritage as well. It's skin color. Because my mum is white. My mum is English. Yeah, I still receive those same comments.
Yeah.
I remember there was a girl in my primary school, and black girl, she always used to ask me, where are you from? I was so confused. I said, I'm English. Again and again, time and time again, I told her I'm English, I'm British. She kept asking me, where are you really from now? I don't think she knew what she was asking.
Yeah.
I'm English. I was raised by my mum. I've lived in England the whole time, so I'm English. So it's confusing to me as well. So I think that really shows it's not just a heritage thing. It's nothing but the color of my skin.
Yeah.
Because everything else in me is English. My culture is English. Growing up with mum and growing up in England.
Yeah.
The way I act, I tended to hang around more with the English guys who maybe had British culture, because that's what I could relate to.
Yeah.
The only thing that was different was my skin color.
Yes.
That was it. But I think ignorance is actually partly a generational thing. I think a lot of people's default settings have come from, because we're not far past slavery. We're not. It's a few generations. So to expect racism from ignorance to have dwindled out by now is I think unreasonable. I think there's things that have been handed down from grandparents to parents to now people that are our age, and their default setting is ignorance. To say things like, "Oh, where are you from? You're not really from here. You're not really from here." I don't think it's always. I think most of the time it's not malicious. Actually, it's ignorant. But I think the answer to that is to cultivate a habit of empathy.
Yeah, it's good.
How would you feel? It's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes when there's someone white who's lived in England their whole life. They would have never been there. But I guess imagine that person found out that they were a couple % Nigerian or something. Okay, so I'm half English. So if I'm not really English because I'm not completely white, then can I say the same thing to you? And how would you feel if I said that to you?
Yeah.
Because you're 2% Nigerian, I come to you now and I say, well, you're not really English. There's a bit of something going on in you. You're not fully English. How would that make you feel?
Yes. If you don't mind talking about your background, your mom was...
My mom's fully English.
And your dad then is from...
So my dad's got quite a big mix, to be honest. So he's Jamaican, that's his community.
Yes.
But because Jamaicans don't originate in Jamaica, they're not originally from Jamaica. They're there through slave trade, through American slave trade.
Yes.
so I done an ethnicity test a few weeks ago, and he's like all over Africa.
Wow.
There's Chinese in there as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your experience then, and it's interesting to hear your perspective. So you felt, SJ, you felt that the racism that you experienced was quite spiteful. People making derogatory remarks, cheap jibes.
Yeah.
The lowest common denominator that they could go to just have a quick dig at you. But your perspective is, in your experience, it's the racism is more from ignorance. Now, talk to us about your experience, because obviously, and I don't want to obviously steal your thunder because it's your story to tell, but in a sense, there's even extra complexity with your situation coming from can I say the term mixed race background? Is that okay for me to say that? That adds extra complexity because you're getting it from lots of different, I guess, quarters. Can you just tell us about that experience?
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure you can relate to this heavily as well. But yeah, so I mean, from the youngest age, so I remember the story I told you about with the girl asking me where I'm from and saying, at that time I didn't see color. I was just English. I didn't think I was different to anyone else.
And how old were you when that girl said?
So I would have been year 3, so about 6, 7.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the earliest incident of just overt racism I remember would have been about a year after that. I remember being on a playground and just playing with my friends. I was playing with some new guys, and I remember one of the boys said to another boy, "Don't play with him. He's brown." And that's when it really struck me. Okay, I'm different. There's something going on here. I was really upset about it. I went home to my dad, told my dad, and I remember his response. His response was, "Don't stress. People go on holiday to look like you." And that gave me that gave me peace. That gave me peace in that moment. Yeah, it did. But the majority of the racism I face hasn't been overt. It's been more systematic, and it's hard to see it unless someone tells you about it. So it really would have started in secondary school. So going into year 7, my 2 best friends were white and black. Again, we're friends. We got along. We had things in common. It was nothing to do with race. That was it. And there came a time in year 8. So we've been friends for a while, and things began to get more segregated. So my black friend felt pressure to go and hang around with the big group of black guys.
Who pressurized him to do that?
The black guys.
His black friends.
Yeah. He felt like they felt like he should be chilling with them because they were the black group and they had things in common in terms of culture and stuff. So he came to that, and then my white friend as well felt a need to go and hang out with the white guys. So that left me for the same pressures. Yeah. So that left me completely in the lurch, essentially. And then the battle of feeling like I had to pick. So I could no longer identify as mixed race because there wasn't a group for me.
Wow.
I had to be white or I had to be black.
Wow.
So that it was a struggle going to the white guys. More naturally, I feel like I could relate to them because of the British culture, and because I didn't really have an input of any different culture. But they rejected me completely because I didn't look like them. And again, it's the thing like you were saying, bro. You're not English. You're not really English because you don't look like us. Even though the majority of my race is English.
Yes.
So there was that struggle with the white guys, and then with the black guys. Again, I couldn't relate to them on a cultural level. They grew up with, like, say, your parents were immigrants. If your parents are immigrants, then they're receiving all that culture from their home country. Same way Laulu has all the Nigerian culture because he's immigrated from Nigeria recently, and so have his parents, or some of his family. So with them, I couldn't relate to their culture, and also, again, I'm not fully black, so there was always a thing there, like, okay, you're not really black though, like you can't really identify as black. So I can't identify as white. I can't identify as black. Yeah. It's complete confusion and lack of belonging. And that was a big factor in what led to the events and the trouble that I got into after that period.
And you've got a dramatic testimony. I mean, I remember you sharing your social worker wrote something like it's just a matter of time until he kills somebody, was it?
Or ends up in prison.
Or ends up in prison. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that path that you took then was as a result of feeling abandoned, alone. This was you carving out your kind of life for yourself. Not that the direction of travel was brilliant, but that was your way of sort of claiming your own identity, so to speak. I mean, talk to us a little more about that, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't find belonging in these places in school, and I felt I had to go somewhere else.
Yes.
And so then I didn't realize what I was getting into. First, it was just anger, and the anger led me to where I ended up. So the anger meant that now I'm on my own. If anyone gives me a reason to do something or to react to them, I'm going to do it.
Yes.
So that led to fights, and then I got excluded from school, and then I ended up in a short stay school, which is like an exclusion unit. And you're meant to go back to school, but I never did. And it's there where I was like, okay, now I can actually have belonging, because going into that environment, I came from a grammar school. I was smarter than all of the people in that school. And I, if I'm honest, I manipulated them into being my group and doing what I wanted them to do.
You became the leader, in other words.
Yeah, and that gave me a real sense of belonging.
Yes.
And that's why I stayed in that situation for a while. Yeah.
Because you're amazing, because obviously, and those of us who are part of the Junction Church community, you're so well respected. You're there at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
You're there, and you're a leader, because you lead I noticed we put out carpet in our venue on Sunday mornings, and you're the guy who leads all of that. So your skills come into play there. So it's fascinating for us to hear then, how you've got to where you're at. Of course, we would then say the grace of God has had a massive impact on your life as well. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Ori, I'd like you to share, because it seems appropriate to come to you. You're also, would it be right to say, from a mixed race background?
Yeah.
Would you care to just tell us a little bit about that then?
So my parents are both immigrants.
Yes.
My mum is Swiss,
Yes.
with also some Italian heritage, and my father is Ghanaian.
Yes.
And so they moved to the UK.
So they came to the UK. You're born in the UK.
Yeah.
How can you relate then, for example, to what Regan has just been saying there?
I can relate partly.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say being pulled between the two different worlds, and being forced to almost choose one or the other, or being felt like I should choose one or the other, was something that I experienced. But I know something that was different was I really struggled with my identity and also being defined as a British person,
Right.
which is kind of unique, I guess. A lot of the time, as someone of a minority, you're trying to fight that you are British, but by, I guess, that assumption that because you do have colour, you're not. But I found that in secondary school, everyone was classing me as half British, and I didn't really feel like that was my identity, because everything that was instilled in my home life was more with Alpine culture, within the Swiss and Italian Alps, and that's very different from British culture. And so I didn't really identify with Britishness, and especially where I grew up in Surrey is quite a white predominant area, and I didn't really connect with anyone with culture, and the way that home was, the way that I interacted. I go and see my family a lot, and they're all outside of the UK, so having to deal with that was quite a lot, but also to deal with identity. And because I grew up in a predominantly white area with a lot of the influence of my mum growing up, I didn't know how to kind of engage with my black side, but also then was never felt like I was white. So similar to Regan, everyone always classed me as other. And I remember a situation within secondary school, and I was just going to class as normal, and a teacher started picking on me in class and was saying about how I shouldn't, my hair, so I had my natural hair out in a ponytail, and she was arguing that I had extensions in, and that it was against school policy, and that I should take them out or I'll get in trouble. And I was saying, well, this is my natural hair. I don't really know what else to tell you. And then she was like, you're lying. And it became this whole situation. And I was like, have I done something wrong? And that really triggered, I guess, an identity crisis to like fit in.
And how old would you have been at that time then?
So I would have been about 12.
Mm.
So I was like, I need to do everything to fit in,
Wow.
to just like be seen as in the background and not seen as someone that's different or someone that is going to cause any trouble for anyone else. And it's definitely something that mixed people, and I'm sure other people do, where it's almost like you tone down your culture to fit into the people around you. So I straightened my hair, like I changed the way that I talked. So there are like certain words where my parents, because English is far from their first language, they will mix up words or they won't say sentences that are grammatically correct. And I would go to school and be made fun of for doing the same. So I had to almost like change completely who I was to fit in.
Wow. And it's not as if like when you're going through your teenage years that life is not complex enough, but then you add in those identity issues and that is huge. Now I'm talking to you now, you're super smart, you're doing a brilliant degree, which I could never do because I don't even know what you study, but business studies, isn't it? Yeah. Economics, that's it. I mean, we need your
Close
help.
enough.
So, you know, and I've known you for what, 2 or 3 years now, something like that.
A bit more than that.
3 or 4 years. The Ori that I know is this super smart person who's doing really well, going to get a good degree and a good job and so on afterwards. Now that you're in your early 20s, am I going to say?
Yeah.
How are things? Is anything different now then compared to what it was when you were going through your teens then? And and if anything is different, is that because you view it differently or because circumstances are different?
I think it's both. I think, especially the situation that I was in Surrey, I was the only person there. And so I was the voice, and that voice was often shut down. So even if I would try and speak out against racism, a lot of the time, the comments that would come back is that I'm overreacting or that it's not that deep or that I'm making like a bigger deal out of it, and terms like that are really harmful to other people. So my voice was never really heard, and it was almost silenced to the point where then when I came to university, I was like really confused about how I should speak and what I should do in situations to do with racism. And I've definitely seen, especially when experiencing racism in uni, and being in groups of people that have grown up in different areas within the UK and seeing the way that they've interacted, that where you grew up definitely changes a lot about your perception on how to deal with racism. So I found that people that grew up around Black and minority communities, they were able to speak about it a lot more freely and felt comfortable to do that, while other people that grew up with predominantly white areas, there was almost this sense of uncomfortability around it because they knew that if they said something that they would be silenced or that it would cause more harm than good. And through being outside of that situation, from being able to meet friends that were able to understand and sympathize with my issues and the things that I've experienced from racism, but also people that were willing to understand and learn and were curious about it. Because what I found was a lot of my friends at home, they weren't willing to almost, I guess, put their money where their mouth is. And so there were situations where in the pandemic, when Black Lives Matter happened, everyone was posting it on their story. Everyone wanted to say that I'm standing for this and that I'm going to speak out about it because it was like politically correct or it was a trend on social media. And I found when that died down, people's true colors were shown. And there were friends where I'd known them for years and we'd never really had conversations about race, or it being pushed aside, and then it became a trend and they wanted to talk about it and they wanted to learn about it, and I used the opportunity to have conversations with them. But then as soon as it stopped being a trend, things happened. So there was a situation with one of my closest friends at home, and I went home after, I think it was the first year of university, and we just bumped into each other, and it was summer, so we just had like a heat wave. And the first thing that she says to me was, she lifted up her sleeve and she was like, "Look, I'm almost as dark as you are." And I just stood there and I was so shocked, because this was someone that, while Black Lives Matter was happening, they were curious and they were asking all the right questions and they were engaging with it. But actually what they learned and what they took in was very different.
So, Ori, thank you so much for sharing. That is really, really helpful. Laulu, just coming to you then, you came as a student to Loughborough University. Now, yours is a unique story because you came when you were 16 years old, which is younger than normal age for student, right?
Yes. So I'm Nigerian. So I lived in Nigeria all my life, and yes, I literally just came to the UK about 5.5 years ago now. And it was for education purposes. So I was to study in university as an international student. So I'm Nigerian. So I'm not British in any way. And that's why my experiences, really unique. And I mean, I want to even add that hopefully after this conversation, when people are having converse with their friends, to not think, oh, because I'm sharing as a black guy, that everyone then has the same experience as I do, because
no two stories are the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And again, even in my case, like, I didn't live in the UK. Like I lived in a different country with different experiences. And so now with me living in Nigeria all my life, and being there, it was really strange then coming to the UK, because I had lived in Nigeria. I had lived with just Nigerians my entire life, and that had been the norm, that had been the standard, and really racism wasn't a conversation that we ever had between each other, because we were all Nigerian, and really the only big things I would hear from it is maybe from the internet, from social media. I remember the big case, there was a football thing where there was two footballers, Luis Suarez and Patrice Evra, and basically there was an incident there, and that was basically the only thing that got us talking. But in terms of in Nigeria, I wouldn't experience anything personally, from like my mates or from my peers, and it made it really interesting when I then got to the UK and had my own experiences, because it's crazy. Even in the short time that I've been here, like I've had my own experiences of racism as well. Some overt and some covert. But I think what's really hard is that I had to handle it again, living my entire life, Nigerian, and being confident in who I was, and now I was, because of that, quite, I don't know if prideful is the right word, but then I wouldn't take being seen as less, because all my life I'd been seen normal, with everyone else around me seeing me the same way. And now coming to the UK and experiencing a few of the things I did, I really reacted to it in weird ways. And I'll share, I guess, one of the ones. I experienced quite a few things in the few years I've been here. But then actually in the first couple of months when I came here again, as a kid, still at 16 years old in university, I remember I was on my way back from, I think I was getting a haircut, and I was going back home, and I got stopped by the police. And again, I didn't know what this is about. I mean, in a new country, I didn't know this was like standard practice or what was going on. So I was just walking, I got stopped by the police, and then I can tell this story for an hour, but to try and summarize, they basically suspected me for either being in like a drug business or hoarding drugs or transporting drugs in some way, even though I was literally just on my phone on Google Maps looking for my way into the town center to go to the bank. And even in that little experience, a lot of things, for example, a conversation with one of the a policeman at that time, he was giving really weird remarks. So, for example, surprised I was studying mechanical engineering, even though I was from Nigeria and even though I was black. I surprised at things that, again, to him, like a white person could do it, but then a black person, probably not so much.
So you were walking along, this was at night then, wasn't it?
No, this was even during the day.
Just during daylight. So you're walking along, this cop car pulls up.
Yeah.
They accuse you of this. If anybody knows Laulu, like, this is like the sweetest, nicest guy ever.
Oh.
I mean, who serves in church, who's faithful and wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And this is shocking.
Yeah.
This is really shocking.
For me, it was really shocking. I mean, at that time as well, I was really timid, shy again, like I mentioned, in the UK for just a couple of months. And my reaction to all of that afterwards was like I tried to laugh it off. So I remember like my first instinct was to call my sister, who was back home in Nigeria, and I tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, like look what happened. I got stopped and searched." And again, so that's what it's called. It's a stop and search. But then even one thing that I didn't process until afterwards was I know that it's a procedure that happens in the UK, and afterwards, I mean, I did a lot of research and I see that it's done a lot more to to black people than anyone else, and we can get into all of that. But then one thing as well, while I was getting stopped on search, is that I was handcuffed. And
They actually handcuffed.
yeah, so they handcuffed me, and I didn't realize again afterwards, like,
And you're what,
how-
16?
yeah, so I was 16 at the time, and I didn't realize actually. I was like, afterwards, talking to my sister, she was like, "No, like this is serious," and I was like, "Oh no, it's fine," it was just like a standard thing, a standard procedure. And again, it was similar to SJ. My coping mechanism at that time was just laugh it off. And I remember like it would then affect me going along, and then I would have more experiences. I remember one that I had an experience of someone just randomly with no context just calling me a monkey, and I wasn't close friends with this person, and I remember at the time, again, I just like laughed it off. I went on with it, and then the next morning, at this time, I was either 16 or 17. I remember I woke up and I cried, and I then called Pastor Fraser, one of our pastors here at the Junction Church, to then talk about it with him. So for me, it was really a shock. Like I said, coming from a country, from a place where all black people, all Nigerians, then coming here and in the space of a year, experiencing quite a few things, and I thought, wow, this is really weird. And yeah, like it took me a while to actually be able to then deal with those things. Pretty much it took me until the George Floyd kind of period or situation.
Which is 2020, March,
Yes.
April, May 2020, I think it was.
Yes, to then be able to speak to people about it, and then to be able to, I guess, process my feelings, because again, it was at the time where I didn't know how to feel, I didn't know what to feel, because I had not experienced anything of this. And again, a black person might be sat here giving a different experience of experiencing racism all their childhood. I hadn't. And so for me, experiencing that at that time was just like, I don't really understand why. And the more I came to process my thoughts, I kind of responded with anger of why I had to justify myself being black as if that wasn't normal. And again, it's like some people are black, some people are white, some people are Asian. And it's like, well, why is me being black, why do I have to like justify myself, or why do I have to give a reason why I shouldn't experience racism? I'm like, well, no one should. And that's why for me it became really difficult to then deal with. But during 2020, speaking to some friends, especially in this church community, then helped me to process my thoughts, to then help me to know that, it was all okay. And that's one thing that, again, I was fine with this in my childhood. I'd never kind of thought that if I experienced anything like that it was my fault. Like I never thought, oh, well, it's my fault for being black, or being black is bad in any way. I'd never thought that. But in that George Floyd situation, that really served as a kind of reminder for me that no, it's not on me, it's on the people that did it. And there's then a conversation on we need to apply grace, and but at the same time make sure that like to challenge these people on like as they're doing it. But I think the key thing for me at that time was, again, realizing that it wasn't my fault, it wasn't on me, it wasn't anything I did, it wasn't any face I made or anything that they would have accused me of. I was there. There's audio recordings of the stop and search, and they even apologized afterwards, saying no, okay, like they shouldn't have handcuffed me, they shouldn't have done that. But my question was then, okay, well then why did it happen? And that's then
was that a written apology, or was that just a verbal apology?
So it was when my sister had a phone call with them, and then they just apologized for handcuffing me. A little bit annoyingly, I didn't really get an apology even for actually being stopped and searched, because they said that was the procedure. But then the handcuff, they apologized for that. So.
Well, I'm sorry that ever happened. You're just such an amazing guy, and that is truly shocking. And anybody who's part of our church community, you're just so highly respected. Even when you first came, you just came and got involved in church, and you're studying for a good degree. So that's what makes it so meaningful for us, is that we know you. You're such an amazing guy. And I guess that your story is repeated often, many times over. And it's just that we're hearing your story tonight. Many people don't get their story heard. What did that do to you? Because you're obviously a very positive guy. You're an encouraging guy, I guess that experience could drive you to cynicism. And who'd blame you for being cynical after an experience like that? But what did that experience do to you then? Just explain that to us, if you will. And those experiences, I should say.
Yeah, so the thing is, and again, this kind of goes into, and maybe the people that will be able to relate to this experience are some people who have lived in Nigeria or lived abroad. So because we have no experience of racism when we're at home, but because we hear about things, like I mentioned, like there was an incident with the two footballers, and you hear about these things on social media. So even coming to the UK, I did come a little bit with some sort of cynicism, and then thinking just in general, which isn't healthy in itself, but then just in general, like hearing about all these things that happen, like you come with your guard up and then think, you hear about all these things and like you don't really know like what to expect. So when these things happened, I mean, at the time it was actually just more of, oh, well, I kind of thought that this would happen because, I kind of came with this expectation of, people experience this, I see it on the news, I see it on social media. So, it's just me experiencing it. And that's why my initial reaction at the time, and because I was super positive and I could try and see a silver lining at that time, I was trying to, again, justify, what happened. And I think, like I said, as time went on, and as COVID happened, and as the George Floyd incident then became a thing, and I started to actually process my thoughts, I then started to realize, actually, no, like I'm really angry about this. And, I started to have conversations, and I think that's something that's really important, to have people that you can have conversations with about this. And that then helped me to then, come to this from a point of, again, not justifying anything that they did, but at the same time, even in some sense trying to be gracious again with those people, and as Christians trying not to hate them, because that's one thing that's really difficult, is when you experience something firsthand. So then it's really easy to say, oh, forgive, but then to actually do it in practice, it's like, oh, do I really have to? And I think that's something, again, like as that incident was happening, and even as the George Floyd thing happened, and with the the people that did what they did to him, I was kind of thinking, oh, like I don't want to forgive these people, and but I think again, as Christians, like when we're called to forgive, and again, I think it was a balance of, again, making sure to forgive them, but at the same time, then not saying, oh yeah, it's fine, like just forgive them again. No, but I think it's trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or like try and make sure that something is done differently next time, and I think that's really important.
Well, look, this is really helpful, and I think what we've really done in these last few minutes is listened to your experiences, and I thank you for sharing. Thank you for each of you for sharing. And I know that what each of you have shared is but the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that you could say, but it's helpful, I think, for us to listen. And again, from our perspective in church, because we know you guys, I think that's what hits the heart even more, is the fact that you amazing people have been through these things, and it's important that we take time to listen to this. We're going to come back in the next session, or the next podcast, or whatever, what's it called? Next
episode, yeah.
The next episode, you can tell how old I am. And we're going to continue this conversation on, and I want to talk about, so how can people approach the subject then and learn, but do it from a place of a heart that is genuinely wanting to learn rather than just pretense. I think we talked about pretense a little earlier. How can people do that? And then I want to have a conversation about the part the church has to play in all of this as well, because I think that's an important part of the conversation. Guys, thank you for sharing. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.